This story is about Jake, a 13-year-old boy from Florida who had never been to a graveyard before. It wasn't a place his parents ever talked about, much less visited. But when his Uncle Dave asked him to come along to his friend's funeral, Jake didn't want to refuse. The sun was setting when they arrived, casting long shadows over the rows of headstones. The funeral was somber and quiet. Jake stood off to the side, feeling a bit out of place among all the adults. As the service went on, he started to feel a strange sensation. It was like a chill, but it wasn't the cold that bothered him. It was the feeling that someone was standing right behind him. He turned around, but no one was there. Just the old, moss-covered graves and the rustling of leaves in the wind. He tried to shake it off, convincing himself it was just his imagination. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It felt like a presence, something heavy and dark. He could almost hear a faint whisper, like someone trying to speak but unable to form the words. As the last of the mourners drifted away and the sun dipped below the horizon, Uncle Dave finally approached Jake. "Ready to go, kiddo?" he asked. Jake nodded, but he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. As they walked toward the car, he glanced back one more time. And that's when he saw a man standing between the headstones. He wasn't just a shadow or a trick of the light. He was a solid figure. An older man with a weathered face, wearing a suit that seemed oddly out of place in time. The man was staring straight at Jake, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Come on," Jake, Uncle Dave called out, already at the car. Jake blinked, and the man was gone, as if he had vanished into thin air. He hurried to the car, his breath quick and shallow. He didn't say anything to his uncle about what he had seen. He didn't want to sound scared or childish. But the unease followed him all the way home. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that man in the graveyard. The more he tried to forget it, the clearer it became in his mind. Then, just as he was about to drift off, he felt it again, that same chill from the graveyard, a presence standing right by his bed. He opened his eyes, and there he was, the same old man, now standing in his room. Jake wanted to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. The man's eyes were fixed on him, dark and hollow, as if they could see right through him. The old man took a step closer, his face expressionless, but his eyes filled with a deep sadness. Jake could hear a faint whisper again, clearer now but still unintelligible. He squeezed his eyes shut, his heart hammering. When he finally worked up the courage to open them again, the man was gone, but the room was freezing, colder than it had ever been before. The next morning, Jake tried to tell himself it was just a nightmare, just his mind playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew what he had felt was real. Whatever it was in the graveyard had followed him home. And as the days went on, he continued to feel its presence, always just behind him, always watching, never leaving him alone. Jake started seeing the old man more often, in reflections, in dark corners, always watching with those empty eyes. One night as he lay in bed, he heard the faint whisper again. This time he could make out the words, "Help me. Please help me." Jake realized he could never tell anyone about it. Who would believe him? It was just something he would have to live with, a ghostly presence that had latched onto him. A man who had died long ago, still searching for something he could never find. And Jake knew, deep in his bones, that the man would never leave him alone, not until he got what he wanted. But what he wanted, Jake feared, was something he could never give. From that night on, Jake never slept easily again, haunted by the ghostly man's hollow eyes and desperate whispers. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the man's presence grew stronger, more demanding. Jake's world became a place of shadows and whispers, with no escape from the ghost that followed him home from the graveyard. This was not the end, it was just the beginning of how his parents, embarked on a journey to help him heal from the haunting experience. Stay tuned for part 2 to see how their efforts unfold. If you also have any real horror stories or experiences, you can share them via this email, and don't forget to subscribe us for more creepiness.